I first met Buca music before Buca members. I was 27 and it was a time where music was available everywhere on internet. There were lots of websites where you could discover and download obscure psychedelic albums. And one day I found on one of these musical websites the story of the Buca, the amazing story of the Buca, of two artists, Juan and Leslie, who went from Spain to India by car during the 70s and collected on the road poetries, drawings, music, esoteric texts, instruments to make their own book, to create their own religion with everything which is positive in religions.
For 22 moons
And after their travel they came to Deya, lived in one of Robert Graves' houses and recorded there the music inspired by the Buca with brilliant musicians. When I received the book, it was another shock. I remember during 1 or maybe 2 months I read the book while listening to the music, and it was a beautiful experience. I was playing in a psychedelic folk and heavy band called Cosmic Trip Machine, and we were working on our third album, and people loved the two first Cosmic Trip Machine albums. Even today some of them still consider these albums as classics, but there were negative feedbacks at that time. Well, you know, there's always negative feedback when you create something, but one of those negative feedbacks was right, and it was about my lyrics and my accent. As you will notice, I always have this not so good accent, but when I sing it's I walk a lot now, and on my lyrics too. But for the first Cosmic Trip Machine album, I thought it wasn't important. The lyrics weren't important because everybody here speaks French and nobody understands what I am singing and singing, except that Cosmic Trip Machine was listened by people everywhere in the world and not so much by French-speaking people. So I was working on the Curse of Lord Space Devil album, and I wanted to have great lyrics on that one. The Buca offered me the concept of the Curse of Lord Space Devil. Like Leslie and Juan, I decided to use poetries, esoteric and religious texts to create something new. I found Leslie and Juan's address on internet and I sent them a copy of my album, and a few months later they sent me an email to thank me and to say they just love the album, the lyrics, the music. In the introduction to the book, published by Wawa, Juan mentioned that the material for parts 3 and 4 of the Buca was still to be published. I was so happy they like my music that I wrote them something like, if you need me to finish, to record the music of the parts 3 and 4 of the Buca, you can count me in, something like this. No fear, so naive. And I had no reply during 3 months. And suddenly a long message from Juan was in my mailbox. Juan and Leslie asked me to come to their home in Scotland to help them to finish the unreleased part 3 and 4 of the Buca. And the dream began. I played mainly acoustic guitars, synthesizer, bass, sitar and percussions. And my obsession was to stick as closely as possible to the sound on the original tapes and albums. And it was funny because Juan and Leslie weren't as obsessive as me, you know. And they wanted to use digital technologies, laptops, when I wanted to record with old microphones and tapes. And well, I went to Scotland in July 2011, stayed at Juan and Leslie home to record flutes, violins, vocals, percussions, and to produce the records with them. So we decided to go to Mallorca to finish the album together at Carmeta's house later in February. I remember I was a bit nervous about producing these last sessions because Juan and Leslie told me Carmeta was ill, unable to sing a few months ago, and I had no possibility to listen to any recent demos. The first night, while I was waiting for Leslie and Juan with Carmeta, they had a problem with the flight because there was a lot of snow in February in Mallorca, but in Scotland, of course. And I remember Carmeta sang in top of the basic tracks, and her voice was still astounding, even better than on the first Buca album, full of power, softness and maturity. And all my doubts were gone. One of the highlights of this adventure was my visit to Deia with Carmeta, Leslie and Juan. For me, Deia was always a mythic place where great artists I loved since forever lived and made music. That's why to see the houses of Carmeta and Jerry, Leslie and Juan, David Allen, Gilly Smith, Robert Graves, while listening to their amazing stories was really big for me. Really definitely one of the highlights of this adventure. Then we took the same picture at the same place than the original Book of Am picture cover on the road between Deia and Valdemosa. The last day we were happy regarding the walk and a bit sad because of course it was the end. I know Carmeta was really sad. She told me something like, well, you have your band, you have your music, you have your projects, but for me it's over. And yes, that's one of the reasons which leads me to consider the recording and the production of the Book of Inchichu, the sequel of the Book of Am. I wanted to work again with Carmeta because her voice touched my soul, and Juan and Leslie's songs were the perfect vehicle for her to sing. And well, sadly it never happened.
I know something of what is ordained to
2 years later, I was working on the new mix and mastering of the Book of Am Part 1 and 2 when I received a message from Carmeta telling me she had a cancer. It was strange because the room here was filled with her voice, and suddenly I read this terrible news, so it was really a strange moment. And I was working on the new mix mastering, not using the original studio master, but using the original tapes. Because Leslie and Juan told me that during the 70s they made the mix in Palma in a couple of hours, and they were definitely not allowed to comment or change anything in the engineer's work. So the idea with the new mix and master of the Book of Am was to correct the mistakes of the original master. The most striking example is the beginning of O Keep Trace. The original stereo mix is a bit archaic with all these pan effects. You lose informations, instruments, vocals. So I made the same kind of mix for part 1, 2 than I did for part 3 and 4. Some tracks were lost or needed to be fixed. For example, Leslie's percussion on the Cauldron of Regeneration was lost, so I had to sample the percussion, the Leslie percussion, and to recreate the line one beat by one. So to be exactly to have exactly the same line, percussion line, than on the original part one, the original mix. And on a tape I discovered a beautiful song previously unreleased called A Love Charm. I don't know why the song wasn't included in the original part 2. It came just before Love Strength, and it's a very lovely homage to Carmetta, the perfect song to celebrate her memory.